Hello, all my followers. So we're going to continue the Book of Judith today. And remember what happened. I know it's been a long time that we have last time did the Book of Judith. So I just want to give you a little backup, a summary of the story. So there was this one king who wanted to rule the entire world. And he thought he's God himself, so everybody should worship him. And all the other nations he had surrendered, and they all worshipped him and, surrendered, gave him everything that he wanted, except the Israel. And Israel's strength is God himself, but only if they're in the right standing with God. So always God would help them if they're in the right standing with God, and God would not help them if they are not in the right standing with God. So it all depended on how they were standing in good standing with God or not. So Israel got really scared and fasted and, didn't want to surrender because they were afraid if that other king is going to come and rule over us, then he's going to destroy God's temple, everything that, is for worshiping God, and we have to worship him, the king. So they were praying really deeply and fasting, and there was this one woman who was called Judith. And she was a widow, and she was so beautiful and radiant. And she went into fasting and really had the Spirit of God be with her. So she basically, with the help of God, made the plan to go into the enemy's camp and for Israel just to wait, because she's basically, with God's help, going to take care of everything. A woman. So she went into the enemy's camp and pretended to have surrendered because, the Assyrians, though the king's army would destroy Israel, as she pretended, she said that's why she came, because before Israel would be destroyed, she came to surrender. So the head of the army really liked the way she looked. God made her even more radiant and beautiful. And she ended up beheading the head of the entire army that everybody was scared of. So she beheaded him with a sword and took the head of, that army leader to Israel and showed them that he died, he's killed. The army is done. If the head of, the army is done, the whole army is done. And so the army didn't know about that because she did it in secret in the middle of the night when he was really drunk. So if you want to hear a little bit more details about the story, you just have to listen again to the other parts that are in the playlist Book of Judith. And we're going to start with chapter 14 to continue in the reading of the Book of Judith. So, Judith's counsel. Then Judith said to them, "Listen to me, my brethren, and take this head and hang it up on the parapet of your wall. And as soon as morning comes and the sun rises, let every valiant man take his weapons and go out of the city and set a captain over them, as if he were going down to the plain against the Assyrian outpost. Only do not go down. Then they will seize their army and go into the camp and rouse the officers of the Assyrian army, and they will rush into the tent of Holofernes and will not find him. Then fear will come over them, and they will flee before you, and you and all who live within the borders of Israel shall pursue them and cut them down as they flee. But before you do all this, bring Ankir, the Ammonite, to me, and let him see and recognize the man who despised the house of Israel, and send him to us as if to his death." So they summoned Ankir from the house of Uzziah, and when he came and saw the head of Holofernes in the hand of one of the men at the gathering of the people, he fell down on his face, and his spirit failed him. And when they raised him up, he fell at Judith's feet and knelt before her and said, "Blessed are you in every tent of Judah and every nation. Those who hear your name will be alarmed, Now tell me what you have done during these days." Then Judith described to him in the presence of the people all that she had done from the day she left until the moment of her speaking to them. And when she had finished, the people raised a great shout and made a joyful noise in their city. And when Achior saw all that the God of Israel had done, he believed firmly in God and was circumcised and joined the house of Israel, remaining so to this day. As soon as it was dawn, they hung the head of Holofernes on the wall, and every man took his weapons, and they went out in companies to the passes in the mountains. And when the Assyrians saw them, they sent word to the commanders, and they went to the generals and the captains and to all their officers. So they came to Holofernes' tent and said to the steward in charge of all his personal affairs, "Wake up, our lord, for the slaves have been so bold as to come down against us to give battle in order to be destroyed completely." So Bago went in and knocked at the door of the tent, for he supposed that he was sleeping with Judith. When there was no answer, he opened it and went into the bedchamber and found him thrown down on the platform dead, with his head cut off and missing. And he cried out with a loud voice and wept and groaned and shouted and rent his garments. Then he went to the tent where Judith had stayed, and when he did not find her, he rushed out of the people and shouted, "The slaves have tricked us! One Hebrew woman was brought disgrace upon the house of King Nebuchadnezzar. For look, here is Holofernes lying on the ground, and his head is not on him." When the leaders of the Syrian army heard this, they rent their tunics and were greatly dismayed, and the loud cries and shouts arose in the midst of the camp. When the men in the tents heard it, they were amazed at what had happened. Fear and trembling came over them, so that they did not wait for one another, but with one impulse all rushed out and fled by every path across the plain and through the hill country. Those who had camped in the hills around Bethulia also took a flight, and the men of Israel, every one that was a soldier, rushed out upon them. And Uzziah's tent sent men to Betomastim and Bebai and Shobah and Kola, and to all the frontiers of Israel, to tell what had taken place and to urge all the rush out upon the enemies to destroy them. And when the Israelites heard it with one accord, they fell upon the enemy and cut them down as far as Shobah. Those in Jerusalem and all the hill country also came, for they were told that had happened in the camp of the enemy, and those in Gilead and in Galilee outflanked them with great slaughter, even beyond Damascus and its borders. The rest of the people of Bethulia fell upon the Assyrian camp and plundered it, and were greatly enriched. And the Israelites, when they returned from the slaughter, took possessions of what remained, and the villages and towns in the hill country and the plain got a great amount of booty, for there was a vast quantity of it. Then Joachim, the high priest, and the senate of the people of Israel, who lived in Jerusalem, came to the witness the good things which the Lord had done for Israel, and to see Judith and to greet her. And when they met her, they all blessed her with one accord and said to her, "You are the exaltation of Jerusalem. You are the great glory of Israel. You are the great pride of our nation. You have done all this single-handed, and you have done great good deeds to Israel, and God is well pleased with it. May the Almighty Lord bless you forever." And all the people said, "So be it." So all the people plundered the camp for 30 days, and gave Judith the tent of Holofernes, and all his silver dishes, and his beds, and his bowls, and all his furniture. And she took them and loaded her mule, and hitched up her carts, and piled the things on them. Then all the women of Israel gathered to see her and blessed her, and some of them performed a dance for her. And she took branches in her hands and gave them to the women who were with her, and they crowned themselves with oil of wreaths, she and those who were with her. And she went before all the people in the dance, leading all the women, while all the men of Israel followed, bearing their arms and wearing garlands, and with songs on their lips. Judith offers a hymn of praise. Then Judith began this thanksgiving before all Israel, and all the people loudly sang this song of praise. And Judith said, "Begin a song to my God with tambourines. Sing to my Lord with cymbals. Raise to him a new psalm. Exalt him and call upon his name. For God is the Lord who crushes wars. For he has delivered me out of the hands of my pursuers and brought me to this camp in the midst of the people. The Syrian came down from the mountains of the north. He came with myriads and of warriors. Their multitude blocked up the valleys, and their cavalry covered the hills. He boasted that he would burn up my territory and kill my young men with a sword, and dash my infants to the ground, and seize my children as prey, and take my virgin as booty. But the Lord Almighty has foiled them by the hand of a woman. For the mighty one did not fall by the hands of the young men, nor did the sons of the Titans smite him, nor the tall giants set upon him. But Judith, the daughter of Merari, undid him with the beauty of her countenance. For she took off her widow's mourning to exalt the oppressed in Israel. She anointed her face with ointment and fastened her hair with a tiara, and put on a linen gown to deceive him. Her sandals ravished his eyes, her beauty captivated his mind, and the sword severed his neck. The Persians trembled at her boldness, the Medes were daunted at her daring. Then my oppressed people shouted for joy, my weak people shouted, and the enemy trembled. They lifted up their voices, and the enemy were turned back. The sons of maidservants have pierced them through. They were wounded like the children of fugitives. They perished before the army of the Lord. I will sing to my God a new song. O Lord, thou art great and glorious, wonderful in strength and invincible. Let all their creatures serve thee, for thou didst speak and they were made. Thou didst send forth thy spirit and it formed them. There is none that can resist thy voice, for the mountains shall be shaken to their foundation with the waters. At thy presence the rocks shall melt like wax. But those who fear thee, thou wilt continue to show mercy. For every sacrifice as a fragrant offering is a small thing, and all fat for burnt offerings to thee is a very little thing. But he who fears the Lord shall be great forever. Woe to the nations that rise up against my people. The Lord Almighty will take vengeance on them in the day of judgment. The fires and worms will give to their flesh. They shall weep in pain forever. When they arrived in Jerusalem, they worshipped God, and as soon as the people were purified, they offered the burnt offerings, their free will offerings, and their gifts. Judas also dedicated to God all the vessels of Holofernes, which the people had given her, and the canopy which she took for herself from his bedchamber, she gave as a votive offering to the Lord. So the people continued feasting in Jerusalem before the sanctuary for 3 months, and Judith remained with them. After this, everyone returned home to his own inheritance, and Judith went to the Betulia and remained on her estate and was honored in her time throughout the whole country. Many desired to marry her, but she remained a widow all the days of her life. After Manasseh, her husband, died and was gathered to his people. She became more and more famous and grew old in her husband's house until she was 105 years old. She set her maid free. She died in Betulia, and they buried her in the cave of her husband Manasseh. And the house of Israel mourned for her 7 days. Before she died, she distributed her property to all those who were next of kin to her husband's Manasseh and to her own nearest kindred. And no one ever again spread terror among the people of Israel in the days of Judith, or for a long time after her death. And this was the end of the story and the Book of Judith and the reading. I think it is a wonderful, wonderful reading, and it shows already, some people may think that, women didn't do great things in the old times and weren't praised and esteemed high, but they were. Look what she did, and she was really highly honored. And to me, Judith is a mirror of the mother that came incarnated into Mary, to bring also Jesus, the salvation. This Judith brought salvation for the oppressed Israel at that time. And I think this is a wonderful story and shows faith, and that you can have trust in God, and He will use people that you wouldn't expect, circumstances that you wouldn't expect. You can have exterior circumstances looking so desperate and so bad, and God just has a way of raising up the weak, not the wise, but the weak, and to do great things through them, to show His glory through them. So they cannot praise themselves or claim it on their great strength. But Israel could really see that through a little woman. Israel was saved. And I think this is so wonderful to hear. And it's supposed to be edifying for all who feel weak, who feel small and insignificant, and maybe sometimes even a little hopeless in their situations, caught and, somehow not being able to see, to be able to move out of the bad circumstances. But you can see that God has His own way of making things happen. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed this series of Book of Judith. Today I had the green screen again because it was already up, because I did other filming, and I just took the time and wanted to finish the series of Book of Judith. So I wish you a wonderful, blessed day, and I see you soon again with the next video.